The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
All right, here we go. We've got a ton to get to on a very busy program today. It is Wednesday. Jimmy Hyams will join us in just a matter of seconds. Also, it is class time at Tennessee. So who benefits the most from being an early enrollee? We'll discuss that with Jimmy a little bit later in the program. Danny White responds to a fan on Twitter, which seems strange to me. We'll get some insight from Jimmy as to Danny White. Is he too sensitive? And why the Vols could make their first Final Four. Jimmy Hyams wrote that on offthehooksports.com. It is there, so certainly check it out. Ohio State spends $10 million on incoming players in NIL, not the retaining of other players, which I'm sure they had to do. Those numbers are bigger than I had been led to believe, so we'll dive into that. And then apparently Iowa's tampering. They reached out to Alabama offensive lineman Kadyn Proctor during the season. That's a no-no, but the NCAA has no teeth, so what does it really matter? And then Todd Helton, pretty awesome, makes the Baseball Hall of Fame. I was there when Todd Helton was starring at Tennessee. I also was one of the kids that played at Levi Field in North Knoxville instead of Inskip. Caleb, just so you know, the average athletes played at Levi. The good ones like Bubba Trammell and Todd Helton played at Inskip. So we kind of played baseball together when we would have some sort of crossover. But I'll tell you my favorite story about Todd Helton is on senior trip when he got drafted by his first team, which I believe was the Padres. Let's go ahead and bring Jimmy Hyams in here. Jimmy, I was already reporting way back then as an 18-year-old, perhaps with an adult beverage in my hand on senior trip, right outside the room when Todd, amongst the party, everybody had to be quiet. And Todd gets the call from the Padres, I believe. Is that right? Is that who he first got drafted by?
I'm pretty sure it was a Padres, and it was in the second round, I think.
Yeah. Caleb, how are you, sir? I forgot to say hello.
I'm good. Jimmy, he always forgets me when you're on. He just gets so starstruck when you're here. He's just,
I don't do it most days. Jimmy intimidates me. That's what it is.
The intriguing thing about Todd Helton is because you talked about Penny yesterday with Powell High. Todd Helton and Penny Hardaway were in the same graduating class. Talk about like the state of Tennessee, Knoxville producing a baseball Hall of Famer and Memphis producing what would have been a basketball Hall of Famer had he not gotten hurt in the same year.
Jim, and me from Powell High School.
That's right.
So
you couldn't play it in, Skip, but hey, you were Hall of Famer.
No, that's absolutely right. I've got buddies who are still in North Knoxville to this day who will say, I don't remember seeing you at Inskip. No, it's because I was not a great athlete. How about that? Let's go ahead and get rolling here. Who benefits the most from being an early enrollee? Hit that like and subscribe button. Let's do it right now. It is today's tough question, and it's brought to you by our good friend Andy Mason, realestate.com. Today's tough question is now.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, so we've got kind of an unofficial list. They're still waiting on some guys to sign some official financial aid letters, but we can go ahead and dive into the list that I feel really confident in. And I want to start with Jimmy. Jim, you've got the list, and I'm going to run through it quickly. As far as transfers, Lance Hurd, Miles Kitzelman, Holden Stage, Jalen McMurray, Gerard McCoy, Jackson Moy, Jacoby Thomas, Eli Purcell, Jamal Wallace. And then the recruits, Mike Matthews, Boo Carter, Jake Merklinger, Braylon Staley, Peyton Lewis, Max Anderson, Caleb Beasley, Kellen Lindstrom, William Satterfield, Edwin Spillman, Gage Ginther, Idris Farrak, Marquise Gordy Jr., Jesse Perry, and then we mentioned the transfers. So
it's William Satterwhite, by the way, Dave. Your reflexive Satterfield. Love for Satterfield.
I love Satterfield. William Satterwhite, excuse me. All right, so Jim, out of that group, first of all, I can remember back in the day, about the time that you and I started working together, where if you got one or two midterm enrollees, that was a big deal, right? And now it seems like everybody is coming in. What do you make of it, and how helpful is it to a program that's able to bring these guys in December or January?
I think it's really helpful, and it's helpful not only from the football perspective, but it's also just helpful to get acclimated to the college life, to get your classes started, to get into the right dorm, to just kind of feel comfortable on campus. And I think one reason we're seeing more and more of that is because these freshmen know that they have a chance to play right away. And so they want to go ahead and get their career started. Most people now aren't thinking about finishing out high school and playing on the baseball team in the spring. They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about the NFL. They're thinking of, in my opinion, in a business manner. And so I think that's why they want to get a jump start on college, so that they could get a jump start on perhaps becoming a professional.
No, Caleb, I agree. And when you look at this list of guys, I mean, it's way different from stepping in June or July and being expected to pop pads in August.
Yeah, and also as young guys, when you're really just developing in the program your first year, kind of like a sponge for information, but you may or may not play, it's also a good chance to get ahead on classes too. I mean, I think we've all talked about how, look, there is still, amidst NIL, there is still the guaranteed scholarship that is a huge benefit for a college athlete who's not going to the NFL. And it's very hard to be able to get the courses squeezed in that you want if you are serious about your academic career in season. So being an early enrollee, that's an extra semester to really get ahead of the curve, to try to particularly knock out electives. We all remember in college where you had to take all those electives you hated your first 2 years before you could get into your major. And so this is a good time to do that.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start. And what I'm going to do is, on our YouTube page, I'm going to start a poll based off of who Jimmy picks, who Caleb picks, and who I pick. So, Jimmy, let me start with you. Give me 2, 3, 4 guys that you think can benefit the most, and then your one guy that you would point to and say, that is the guy that needs spring practice and is a midterm enrollee and will have an impact because of that.
I'm going to start with the 5-star wide receiver, Mike Matthews. I think he's a guy that can come in and play right away. We saw in the, I guess it was a Polynesian Bowl, where he was MVP. And this offense, it's not extraordinarily complex with the routes and all this stuff, but they do a lot of reading. So you got to be able to read defenses. You got to be on the same page with your quarterback. And I think Matthews coming in early gives him a chance, because I do think there's an opening at wide receiver for somebody to come in and start. I'm going to expect that Boo Carter begins his career in the secondary. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's probably where he'll be. They're opening in the secondary. So I think coming in early gives him an opportunity to play a lot. I don't know about starting, but to at least play a lot. I would also look, and look, there's so many people to choose from on that list.
Yes.
I would go with, I'm going to say the tight end, Stays from Notre Dame. Tennessee needs help at the tight end position because they lost 2 good ones. And the tight end position at Tennessee, tight end position in general is hard to play. You got to be able to block. You got to be able to catch. And then you play some H-back. So I think that Stays coming in early will help him as far as adjusting to a position of need and adjusting to a position that I think is hard to play.
All right, let's go with you, Caleb. Who do you think? If you had to pick a couple and then you're one, I'm going to take one of Jimmy's. He mentioned Boo Carter, so I'm going to go ahead and take that one. And I've got Mike Matthews on the board. Who else in terms of midterm enrollees will benefit the most from spring camp heading into the 2024 season? Today's tough question brought to you by Andy Mason. Andy Mason, real estate Realty.com. And Andy Mason has the best service, best prices in the biz, over 40 years right there in Knoxville. Can't beat that. Caleb, what do you got for me, buddy?
Just so y'all know, to our listeners, I was supposed to go second, but then when Dave heard Jimmy mention Boo Carter, he decided to go second so he could mention Boo Carter to make sure I couldn't mention Boo Carter because I was going to mention Boo Carter. Okay.
I've been told, and Caleb and I have talked about it. Now, the recruiting promises are just that, but that he's been pretty much promised a great shot at starting at strong safety. So I know recruiting talk, but that's why I picked Boo. Sorry to take that.
All right.
It sounds like Dave's promises are just that too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So I actually am going to, and this is on the fly. This is me, Peyton Manning style, audibling at the line of scrimmage with 5 seconds left on the play clock.
Omaha.
Yes, exactly. I was a jazz pianist in high school, all state, so I can improv pretty good. But not to.
By the way, let's ask Peyton Manning what he thinks of stealing the Omaha that we just did.
They're like, that is total bullshit.
Oh, whoa! Hey, what? All
right.
But actually, in all seriousness, one guy that did just come to my mind was Peyton Lewis. And with Jalen Wright gone, I believe Jabari Small is gone too, right? He's not coming back. And I know everybody's talking about Dylan Sampson, but there's two issues. One, we don't know if Dylan Sampson can be a feature back or if he's more of just an all-purpose back to gain a lot of yards. And two, Dylan Sampson's been in the program for 2 years and still hasn't learned how to pass block. And I'm like, again, that's more about will, I feel like, at this point than, I mean, no one's so incompetent that I've never heard of a running back not being able to pick up pass block within like 3 months of being in the program. So I'm thinking those two things, there's a real opening for a feature back. And Peyton Lewis coming in, if he can pick up pass blocking, I think the spring is the perfect time for him to do that. He could easily become the starter in the fall, guys. I don't think it'd be shocking to see Peyton Lewis be the starting running back in September.
Jim, thoughts?
I would actually be surprised if he's starting running back because of Sampson. I agree with you on Sampson's inability in pass protection. The other thing that hurts Sampson, I don't know what they list him at. He looks like he's $180. That's not very big if you're trying to block a 220-pound linebacker that's blitzing. But he does need to improve in that regard. I think they would go with the veteran there. I do think Peyton Lewis eventually, and I don't really know how good he is. I know how good they say he is, but I would be surprised if he started. I would not be surprised to see him get quite a bit of action early in the year. And to Caleb's point, a lot of it's going to be predicated on how well he does in pass protection. One of the best running back pass protectors I saw at Tennessee was Jalen Hurd. Now, one reason he was so good at it was he was so big, which is, to me, the disadvantage that Sampson has right now.
I agree with that. So let's tweak it into this. What high school midterm enrollee? Because I think we all expect for Hurd and Moy to have an impact, and they're supposed to be there as well. So it is on our YouTube page right now. What midterm high school enrollee will get the most out of spring camp? Mike Matthews, Boo Carter, Peyton Lewis, and Jake Merklinger. There we go. And it is time for What the H, because I do not understand for the life of me why you have an athletic director that is responding to tweets via fans. That's odd to me. Here we go.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, so Caleb, can we pull up the tweet? Is that possible? We can.
Yeah, I'll share it with you guys.
Okay, look, we're gonna bring that up. But first, Jimmy, give me your impression of Danny White as a whole. He's been called on this show one of the best athletic directors in the nation. However, I've been told by several people that he does have a little bit of a sensitive side. What's your take?
I think he's done a really good job as athletic director. I think he has a vision. I think he's a really good fundraiser. They're at $200 million now with their budget, which is a lot of money. They've had a very successful athletic department. Many of the coaches succeeding are coaches he didn't hire, but at least I give him credit for not saying, I'm going to go out and hire my guy. If you got a really good coach in place like Rick Barnes, why would you blow him up? So I give him some credit for that. Overall, and also they won the All Sports Trophy in the SEC 2 years in a row. they've done a really nice job. And one of the things I've heard from coaches, he doesn't just emphasize football, which obviously you got to be good in that sport, but he also cares about the results in a lot of other sports. Those coaches know that, and they perform at a high level. So I think overall he's done a really good job. Now, as far as how sensitive he is, I haven't encountered that. I have not seen the tweet either, so I'm interested to see what that is.
Okay, let's go ahead and bring that up, as this was in response to, it's not incredibly easy to see.
It's a long tweet, yeah.
Because it's a long tweet. So, Caleb, read that off for us so that Jimmy knows what page we're on here. But essentially, Jimmy, it was somebody that had a big orange punch, had said day 5 of asking athletic director Danny White to move the student section. And his response is, I guess since it's day 5, I'll answer, but won't be addressing this again. We already changed the student section prior to the 22-23 season, moving the students from the corner to behind both baskets, closer to the court, increasing lower bowl seats by 40% while keeping the same number of upper bowl seats. We did this to enhance our home court advantage, and it has worked. Atmosphere is electric. It's disingenuous to compare to the 3rd largest college basketball arena in the country that's sold out for the season to buildings half the size of the season ticket base. Stop the nonsense. That's a weird, I don't know. I can't imagine Doug Dickey ever doing something like that if Elon Musk was messing with Twitter.
I think there are two perhaps phrases or sentences that could have been left out that would have made this probably more appealing. So don't start with, I guess since it's day 5, I'll answer. Just go ahead and answer. I will address your question. The second one is stop the nonsense. That wasn't necessary to put that in there. So those would be the two. If I were editing his tweet, that's where I would help him.
Agree.
So, okay. So what I agree. This is part of Danny White's strategy, though. He's always been a bit of a troll and a promoter. I mean, to a positive way. And Jimmy, I told Dave this yesterday. Look, as long as Florida State and Miami are stuck in the ACC and until they can get out of it, don't be surprised if because of the work Danny White did at UCF, if they surpass Florida State and Miami as the one of the top dogs in the state of Florida in athletics in the next 10 years. Danny White was so ahead of the curve. He did that troll move in 2017 where he hung a national championship banner. Remember that for them going undefeated?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. So I think this is part of it. My issue with Danny White actually does come from a media perspective. He does things like this. He responds on Twitter, but I don't think Danny White does a lot of, and Jimmy's head will probably explode with me saying this, but I'm actually going to give him a little bit of credit. He doesn't do as much standing in front of the podium when things are going wrong the way Dave Hart did. Now, things haven't been going wrong as much, but say whatever you want to say about Dave Hart. Every time there was an issue, Dave Hart got in front of the podium and answered every question. Jimmy, I'm sure you were at that press conference right after the Tyndall firing. Dave Hart did not leave the press conference until he made sure to answer every single question that was there after that firing. And I don't know if I see the same from Danny White in doing that, but Danny White hasn't made as many mistakes to need to answer to those questions the way Dave Hart did at the same time, to be fair.
Yeah, he didn't hire Donnie Tyndall. So that was and then of course Dave Hart hired Rick Barnes, so you got to give Hart credit for that. When I was before I retired, we had Danny White on a weekly basis during the football season and into the spring. But he does not do a lot of media appearances. I won't say that he's uncomfortable doing it. I just don't know that that's what he prefers to do. He does not get out and mingle as much as some other athletic directors I've seen in the past at Tennessee. But he ends up producing. We talked about the revenue. We talked about what the sports are doing. He does a good job with that. But I think it would serve him well if he got out in public more and perhaps did more appearances. I think it would.
It's interesting. What the H talking Danny White a little bit, brought to you by our friend Don Self, who is in the Chattanooga area, 423-396-2126, or go to donself.net, donself.net. Everybody's shopping prices today, but when you put in a claim, you want to know that your insurance agent can take care of you. Customer service still matters. That's donself.net, donself.net in the greater Chattanooga area. Over 40 years. Check him out, donself.net. let me ask both of you guys this, but I want to start with Jimmy. Do we like some of this? Because if I go to the message board and I pull up one of the first things, I think Danny's tweet is great. He's ripping the guy for being a pest. Jimmy, is this more acceptable nowadays from guys in leadership positions? And there's one guy that somewhere in that Mississippi area, I think, that likes to tweet a lot, that retweeted one of my columns over the weekend, which was strange.
He did.
Yeah. He called me classy too, which basically is to reference the fact that I ripped him last week, just so that he knows. But Jimmy, do we like some of this? Is this good for fans? Does it get the churn going? Is there a flip side to being what I perceive as too sensitive?
It's good for podcasts. It's good for talk radio. It's good for the media. But it's probably better to take the high road in situations like that. I got to the point where I got ripped so much I didn't even read them anymore, so I didn't really care. So I didn't know what people were saying about me. It didn't do me any good if they were ripping me. It didn't do me any good if they were praising me. I just did my job and went on and tried to have tunnel vision. And I think that's what Danny White, I think that's what other people in leadership roles should have. I will say this, every now and then somebody ticked me off to the point where I did respond. And as soon as I hit that send button, I'm like, why did I do that? Just let it go. I mean, who cares what that knucklehead thinks? So, but I do think it's good for the media when you have these situations that occur.
Have you seen the Herm Edwards video with the NFL Symposium? Don't hit send. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
He repeats it over and over. Just don't hit send.
I wish I'd taken that advice a couple times.
He's so impactful about it. Caleb, is some of this cool? I mean, is some of it like you've got an in vogue dude who's kind of hip because he uses the X or whatever the heck we call it?
Yeah, but I'm with Jimmy. I don't know if it's good for what his job is. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I think he really is just trying to address questions that were asked to him, and he has responded to fans. I mean, I see Jimmy's point from a media perspective. I'm like, we feed off the drama. I like drama. I like chaos. Yeah. I'm like the Joker in Batman. I'm an agent of chaos. So, when people come at me on Twitter, Jimmy, I will say I come back and I don't regret it. It actually fuels me. It's and some former players have come at me before, and it fuels me to say, I think I'm going to write something else to upset them because I had so much fun upsetting them this time that I think I should just target them and tell them why they specifically sucked when they played at Tennessee. And so
I didn't have that much time. That'd have been my job responding, so I just decided to let it go.
4 hours a day on the radio makes it difficult. But we may have a young John Adams on our hands. That sounds like something John would say. Yes. Jimmy's column on basketball is fantastic, so I encourage you to check it out. Jimmy, I think, and you wrote that Tennessee has a great opportunity to make the Final Four. And if you can go over kind of some of the reasons of why you think that, your column read like I thought. So I don't know what that says about you or me, but I was thinking all the exact same stuff, and I thought it's fantastic.
Well, there's several boxes that I think you need to check if you want to be a Final Four caliber team. One is you need an elite scorer. Somebody gets you a basket to perhaps end a drought, and they've got that in Dalton Connect. What he's done recently, 4 straight games with at least 25 points. He had a stretch where he scored like 38 points in maybe 6 games, but he had an ankle injury. I think that impacted it, but now that he's fully healthy, so you've got the elite scorer. You've got a very good point guard, Sakai Ziegler, who can score. He's mounting up assists. He leads the SEC in assists, and he's very good at steals. He had 4 against Alabama. So you got the elite scorer, you got the point guard, you got an inside scorer in Jonas Adu. He has really come on. He's got a really nice left-handed touch around the basket, and he's improved his average to where he's now at over 12 points a game. The other thing you have is elite defense. According to Ken Palm, Tennessee's defense has been ranked number 2 in the nation in defensive efficiency. So that's another thing I like. The other part is I like their depth. They had a stretch where, in my opinion, Josiah Jordan-James and Santiago Vescovi did nothing. And yet Tennessee won the majority of those games because they got good performances off the bench from a Meshack, or they had a Gainey the other day hit 3 out of 5 on threes against Alabama. And I know he's a better shooter than what he's been. So I'm looking at these parts and thinking, man, when Vescovy and James get it going, and Vescovy played well against Alabama, but when they get to playing as they're capable of, I'm looking at a very deep team. The one area I don't like about this team right now, and there may be others that you could point out, but when they have gone against a physical big man who can score, they've not done a good job. Whether it was against Purdue, Kansas, North Carolina, second half against DJ Burns at NC State, Mississippi State, those guys hurt Tennessee with their inside scoring because they were physical.
Yeah, Jimmy. So I wanted to ask you about, because my big thing has always been in March, you got to be able to shoot from 3. But I think what held Tennessee back last year was they had no inside scoring to draw people away from the perimeter defensively, because let's just face it, Uros Plavsic was not that much of an offensive threat under the basket. But how big of a deal is it that, every one of these games that Don't Connect has been going off, Jonas Adu has been getting double figures and underneath the basket. And by the way, not from the mid range. He's been scoring inside the paint.
Yes.
How big of a deal is that when March comes, that now as long as he's healthy, he seems like he's drawing attention away from the perimeter now, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And it's left Tennessee with more open shots. The other thing Tennessee's done, and I think they've done, Rick Barnes has done a good job adjusting to this. He's not running all that motion offense that he did before. He's isolating Knet, and then he's going with the pick and roll with Knet and Adu, or Knet and somebody else. But they've been using Knet in that regard, what they have called at times the 1-4 offense. Knet and then 4 guys spread out, and then they do a pick and roll off of that. But I think Adu's ability to score inside has helped on the perimeter because if you want to stop Adu, now you almost have to double team him. He's not a good 3-point shooter, but he is a capable 12 to 15-foot jump shooter. He can do that. And so that can also at times help take a big man a little bit away from the basket. But I do think his production inside has helped this offense overall.
Jimmy, let me ask you this. It was a topic that came up this week, and it's a stance I took. I talked to Isaiah Victor about it. I think he thinks I'm a little bit crazy. But I think at the end of the season, we'll say Dalton Knecht was the best scorer since Bernard King. That's skipping a couple of pretty big names, but I do think he's that good. I make the Jason Tatum comparison. What do you think? Is that a reach?
Well, I like the fact that Knecht can score at all 3 levels. Lofton was a great scorer, but he was primarily a 3-point shooter, right? He didn't go to the basket very much. I might stop at Allen Houston. I thought Houston was a terrific scorer. He averaged over 22 points a game in his career, and he was consistent with that. He wasn't, I don't know that he could take it to the basket the way Knecht does, but Allen was a really good 3-point shooter, a really good pull-up jump shooter, mid-range. But it's hard for me to ignore a guy that scored 2,800 points in his career. So I think I would stop at Allen Houston.
That's fair. To rebut that, I think Allen Houston was an elite scorer, obviously, but a spot-up shooter more oftentimes than not in the NBA, and he took a lot of shots because they didn't have a lot of guys around him. Now, admittedly, I was a college student that pretty much didn't know that there was basketball going on because the program was so bad at the time. But take me back to that time. Did Allen shoot a lot because he was open, or did he shoot a lot because nobody else could shoot the ball?
It was a combination of it. He was an elite scorer, and so you wanted him to shoot a lot, just like Tennessee wants Knecht to shoot it a lot. He didn't have a lot of scoring around him, as I recall. They had Carlos Groves, who was an inside guy. I think they had Wharton on the team. So some of this kind of blends a little bit with me, but I don't remember them having – there was a guy named Corey Allen that was on the team. They had some decent players surrounding him, but they didn't have anybody that was near the caliber of what Houston could do offensively. And he could score off the dribble. He just wasn't a guy that would take it to the rack very often. Now, and also in deference to that, my opinion, based on my memory, Dalton Knecht's got a whole lot more offensive weapons around him. I mean, I know that Some of these guys haven't been shooting really well from three-point range. We have seen an uptick from Ziegler in the last, 8 or so games, but Vescovy is a better shooter than he's shown. So is James. So you've got more weapons to score around Connect than you do around Houston. So I do think some of it was out of necessity, but also I thought Allen was just a terrific shooter.
So, Jimmy, I wanted to ask a little bit about, because one person I feel like we missed was Dale Ellis as a scorer too. But he did seem to have more help, didn't he? The early Don DeVoe years. Was Dale Ellis alone in willing that team to the NCAA tournament, or did he have more help than Connected around that time?
He had Willie Burton. He had a couple of other guys. They had a pretty good point guard at that time. Here's the thing about Dale Ellis, and I watched him play a number of times. I did not know Dale Ellis could shoot outside of 12 feet.
Right.
When he was in college. They put him at the post at 6'7", and he was either too quick for the guy to defend him, or the guy wouldn't come out to 12 feet to guard him. I had no idea Dale Ellis could shoot a three-point shot. And he gets it without. They got in the NBA. Was he at one time the all-time leading three-point shooter in the NBA? Most threes made?
I want to say that's right, Jimmy. I mean, he was I do remember that. He was a completely different player. And I guess I was like 8 when he played at Tennessee.
Yeah. And DeVoe saw that Ellis was such a great player around the basket. And so he didn't go outside and shoot much at all. Now, I was told that in practice, he would go out there and he was knocking down outside jumpers. But in games, he hardly ever took a shot outside of 12 to 15 feet. Now, was he a really good scorer? Yes. I think he had, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb, I think he had a couple of seasons where he averaged around 20, 22 points at Tennessee. He was the SEC Player of the Year. He was hard to guard. But looking back, I think Tennessee could have used him in more of a variety of ways to score rather than just posting him up at the basket.
Oh my gosh. And a reference by Derek Dale Ellis and NBA Jam from downtown 3. He's on fire. You probably never played NBA Jam, did you, Jimmy?
No.
Oh, it's the best game ever. They've got it all in Massachusetts where my son goes to school. It's like that's a big basketball area. So it's silly, it's goofy and everything, but it's a fun game. But anyway, getting back to Ellis. So I'm going to show my ignorance. Was it not having the three-point line in college at the time? Was the three-point line there? Is that why he didn't shoot outside? Or that?
They did not have a three-point line until 87.
Okay.
I believe that's right. And so when I started covering Tennessee in 1985, Ellis, I think, was gone. I think
that was Tony White, right?
Yeah, Tony White came along. And I think they put in the three-point shot when Tony White toward the end of his career, but I don't think it was there at the start of Tony's career. And by the way, Tony White was a heck of a scorer. He averaged 24.5 points one year, led the SEC in scoring. And he also was a guy that was a three-level scorer. He could hit the three, he could hit the mid-range jumper, and he would take it to the basket. I'm glad you mentioned Tony. Tony was another outstanding scorer for Tennessee.
Yeah, as a kid, that was my first favorite basketball player at Tennessee. And then Johnny Jones was my first favorite football player at Tennessee.
You could legit build a all-time elite Tennessee basketball team of players who were elite scorers stuck with no talent around them, so they had limited team success. And it would be Tony White, Allen Houston, and Ron Slay's senior year, when Ron Slay was really we have him on the show. I love him, but he had to labor under Buzz Peterson, and you just feel so bad for the guy that he had to play for Buzz Peterson and Jerry Green. And so
last thing. So Jimmy, you're putting together your all-time Tennessee team. Are you taking Tony White or Zakai Ziegler, and is it close?
I'd take Tony White. I know Ziegler's really good, but Tony White was something special. Now that he was an SEC caliber player of the year, he like I said, he led the league in scoring one year. He had 2 phenomenal years. He had I actually saw his 2 highest scoring games. He had a 49-point game and then a 51-point game. The 51-point game finally broke the record. He did that against Auburn. The funny story about that is that Sonny Smith, the Auburn coach, kept fouling Tony White late in the game, and White was glad to do it against Auburn because Sonny Smith didn't recruit Tony White. So Tony was one who loved sticking it to Sonny Smith. But I would take Tony White over Ziegler, and I like Ziegler. I think he's got a really nice all-around game. But man, Tony was special.
Yeah, he was so fast, and the way he would weave in and out on fast breaks was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, it's one of the guys that made me a sports fan.
What you did like that, that's what Don DeVoe used to do when Tony would shoot all the time with these acrobatic, but then it would go in and Don DeVoe couldn't do anything. Okay, all right. That's not a good shot. Oh, well, never mind. It went in. Okay.
Jimmy, love talking to you each and every Wednesday. Appreciate the time, and let's do lunch sooner rather than later.
All right. I look forward to that. Dave, I appreciate it. Caleb, I appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
Best of that gorgeous grandson, man. He's got his grandfather's eyes. He does. Those blue eyes.
I'll see him in about 5 minutes.
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
Can I be an uncle? Because my wife and I are both only children, so we don't have any nieces or nephews. So can you call me Uncle Dave? I've asked Josh Ward to do the same thing.
What did Josh say?
He's working on it.
I'll work on it. I'll mention Uncle Dave to my grandson Orion today and see what his reaction is.
Love it. Have a blessed day. Thanks, Jimmy.
Take care, guys.
Jimmy Hyams. Yeah. Can I be an uncle? Caleb is expecting. Can I be Uncle Dave to your young one?
Honestly, uncle just sounds weird to me. And I am an uncle. I just hate being called an uncle. It just feels weird. It feels
sounds a little like that guy from Family Guy. Get your fat ass out here.
Herb. Hey there, Muscly Arms. No, what I think of, and y'all are gonna laugh. What I'm a big Bridget Jones fan, and there was a real big perv in that movie that insists all the younger women call him uncle.
Okay, now I'm not asking you, Josh or Jimmy anymore because I don't want to be. And listen, there was some discussion on here about Caleb may have said something flippantly about a guy hitting a woman. He was making fun of somebody. Caleb's one of the greatest people I know. He's not an advocate of hitting women. So Rocky Top Tom or whoever, come back to the show. We love you.
I'll be honest about what happened. You were off the show, Dave, and basically people got mad at me because I didn't say we were talking. It was that day when your power went out. And I was interacting with the message board, and it was brought up that someone brought up that Alabama has no integrity because they didn't suspend the player for hitting the fan at Neyland Stadium last year that stormed the field. And all I said was there needs to be a lot more context. I don't think he directly intentionally hit a woman. I think he was walking off the stadium and fans were storming the field, and in the chaos, he reacted in a way he shouldn't have. That doesn't mean it was right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he directly was like, I'm going to hit a woman. You know what I mean? So
I just for that instance, I would have probably suspended him, but it was a gray area. It was not clear. So anyway, we wouldn't. I don't know.
So I got accused of defending hitting women at that moment, which I'm like, okay, if you're going to straw man me like this, whatever.
Okay. That is, I promise you that Caleb is one of the greatest guys I've ever known. And I could give you several examples, but instead we're going to talk about the Vols because and we hope we get Rocky Top Tom back because he was fantastic. Man, there is one school that has spent a ton of money on NIL, and I have a little bit of insight as to how much these schools are spending on NIL. And this number absolutely blew me away. And I got to be honest, I don't know that Tennessee can compete with the kind of number that I heard this morning with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. In 2 minutes, we'll discuss that off the Hook Sports.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Ah, gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
All righty. So Tennessee is where in NIL cash compared to other programs in the nation? If I just ask you right out of the chute, Caleb, would you say top half of NIL cash available to spend, top 10%, top 5%, top 1%? So keep in mind, we're talking about a roughly 130 Division I football program. So it kind of works out the percentages. Would you have them top 10, top 5, one would be the number one, basically, school in the nation based off percentages. So where would you have them right now?
On a year-to-year basis, I would have them actually number one. I think they're number one on a year-to-year basis with NIL cash to spend. Now, that doesn't mean in any given year they're going to spend the most, but I think over a period of time, Tennessee has the most NIL cash to spend. I think I think there may not be a close second. And it has a lot to do with what Jimmy talked about. Danny White's so good at fundraising that they already had a large collective because of their boosters and their donors. And now those boosters and donors don't even have to commit that much to the football program. And let's be honest, Josh Heupel, you don't have to pay him what you had to pay Nick Saban or what they paid Brian Kelly or Kirby Smart. So he comes a little bit cheaper right now.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you, but first, lay down what we're talking about, and it has to do with Ohio State, that spending 8 digits on a group of players perhaps could be a little bit desperate. We'll get into that as portions of the program are brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com, Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. So, Caleb, let me ask you about that number. $10 million. Ohio State is crowing about the money they can spend. I don't know if you have a release on that you want to pull up, but they're the ones self-promoting it. $10 million just on incoming players, not to keep the Cooper Mazes of the world. That's what Ohio State is spending. Is that?
No, that's what they've already spent. That's what they've already spent, which is even crazier.
They could spend more before the second signing day.
Yes. This is what a source told 10 TV in WBNS News was able to get a hold of this. And basically, they have been loading up on talent. And this is where you have to think, look at who Ohio State has been adding. They added the Alabama transfer quarterback, Julian Sand, who was a number 3 quarterback in the nation. And so they got him. They have, he joins with Kansas State transfer quarterback Will Howard. 2 quarterbacks that expect to start next year both agreed to go to Ohio State, which is crazy on its own. And then on top of that, safety Caleb Downs, who we know was probably the best defensive player in the open market this year. That wasn't going to be a headache like Walter Nolan. And then center Seth McLaughlin, who did play horrible in the Rose Bowl, let's be honest, But at the same time, Seth McLaughlin does have a lot of raw potential, and he just wasn't ready for that moment. So, yeah, they have been, but there were a couple of players where they did spend some money was to get players that, Dave, I'll just tell you, they spent a bit of it on player retention, but not player retention like Tennessee. For instance, Tennessee spent money to keep, we believe, Cooper Mays back, right? But
Cooper probably a little bit. Keenan, although Keenan didn't have as much leverage. John Campbell Jr., not as much leverage. But I think everybody that we've talked about that have returned that could have gone got a little chunk. Cooper's the lead dog in that.
Right. But all of them also have a chance to improve their draft stock this year, too, at the same time. It's not like we're talking top 5 draft pick that they threw away. Like, it's not like John Henderson in 2000, who literally left millions on the table to come back to Tennessee in 2001, and the same with Peyton Manning in 96 to 97. Well, Ohio State got that with Travion Henderson. He'd have been the top running back in the draft this upcoming year, and he chose to come back to Ohio State, which was the weirdest thing. Plus, they added a 1,000-yard rusher, Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. So we're talking, they're loading up on talent, players competing at the same position, and they're spending a ton of NIL cash to do it. I'm pretty sure they're basically telling Ryan Day, you're out of excuses. If you don't win a national championship this year, we're firing you. That's what they're trying. That's what they're trying to do.
Wow. Derek saying TMZ currently surfacing dirt on OSU. If that's the case, put a link in there, Derek. I think you're joking, but I'm not sure. That's nothing would surprise me now. TMZ is all about the clicks. Who cares about having any integrity whatsoever? But they've broken into an area where they do break some stuff. Hit that like and subscribe button. Smash the like button if you haven't done that to this point. So Caleb thinks Tennessee can absolutely compete. That brings us to 4 downs, NIL style. Derek said he's joking. I was excited.
4 Downs brought to you by Dynasty Spas, the most comfortable spas made in the United States of America, right here in East Tennessee. Drop in for the all-new showroom in Athens. Dynasty Spas, perfect for all 4 seasons. 4 Downs, presented by Off the Hook Sports.
Yeah, I mentioned Off the Hook Sports, and you get $500 off of your spa, and it comes with everything they can deliver in Knoxville. Go to that Athens showroom, support our sponsors. That's why we're here. So, Coop, what do? We're going to jump into the hot tub.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All righty. Let's go. What down?
Coop here. First down.
All right. So, what do you make of Ohio State self-promoting this number? Tennessee's done some self-promotion of NIL, but I got to be honest with you. I don't think it's the best business practice. Because if I say that Off the Hook Sports just made $10 million last year, then Caleb Calhoun and Caleb Giroux are going to come say, well, where's my raise? And I wouldn't blame them for doing it. I think it's a little silly, and you put yourself in a position where a kid says, you spent $10 million last year. I'm a quarterback. Spend a lot of money on me. I think it's stupid. And I think most Ohio State fans are kind of off.
I think most of the time I agree with you, but sometimes I think this is done for pressure. I think Tennessee did this to let people know they have the number 1 NIL collective. And right after they did that, remember, Danny White started his fundraising goal of $500 million. Danny White's point in all this was to the fan base, guys, I need some money from y'all if y'all want to keep having this collective at number 1 to get Nico. That it's connected. He basically is trying to make the point, we don't get Nico. Danny White is saying to everybody, Tennessee, that we don't get Nico, guys, without the NIL collective. And the NIL collective is only possible if y'all help us reach this fundraising goal. That's basically what happens. Now, Ohio State, you do know, here's something to think about, Dave. They just hired Ross Bjork, the former athletic director at Texas A&M.
Yes, and I love Bjork when he was a singer as well. Go ahead.
Okay. So they hired Ross Bjork, who was responsible for the firing of Jimbo Fisher and responsible for the 12th Man initiative that got in trouble with NIL last year. So Bjork is a big NIL guy. I think part of this is a method by Bjork to literally make it publicly known. A new athletic director, NIL coming up. He wants to make it clear. He wants to set the stage right now to make it smooth when he decides to fire Ryan Day next year. Because I think he wants Ryan Day gone.
Yeah, I think they're all in. This is like the same thing as the they hired Bill O'Brien, offense coordinator. I think you may have mentioned that, right? So
Yep.
they bring him in. He's an offensive coach. I think it's basically give you everything to see if you can make it. And if you screw it up, bye-bye. You're gonzo.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what it
happening.
is. And don't be surprised with Ohio State if there's another Lincoln Riley type move, like a guy goes from a big school to another big school. Now, I don't know who that opens it up, but you could start talking about guys that have had success. Steve Sarkisian,
Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin. I don't think these guys want to go to Ohio State, but I'm just talking about if you have Ohio State to offer and this type of money and NIL, then you don't have to hire an up-and-coming offensive coordinator.
It's a top 3 job in the country. It's a top 3 job in the country.
Agreed.
Second
Second down, Coop.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Okay. Will we ever see a moment again in our lifetimes where NIL takes a back seat to anything else in high school recruiting? I'm not talking about transfers. I'm talking about high school football recruiting.
We already saw it, and yeah, we're going to see it again. And it's this: when you have you might see it with Kirby Smart now. I think players right now are taking what was the Saban discount. I think you're seeing the Kirby Smart discount, where players are realizing, particularly on defense, Kirby Smart's going to get me to the NFL and make me a top 10 draft pick. So I'll sacrifice some NIL money for that. You're seeing, I bet you see it with John Calipari in basketball. John Calipari can be like, look at what I've done with guards. Look at how many lottery picks I've produced. I'm sorry. I think if you are an elite coach in terms of NIL, in terms of pro talent that you've produced, look, I think Fulmer would have gotten an NIL discount in the late 90s had it existed.
I think, from what I've been told, Josh Heupel's already gotten a discount. And I think it was obvious by Big Mac over the weekend. I don't think George McIntyre with Merklinger and Nico on the roster was promised a ton of money. I think he wanted to come to Tennessee partly because he was an in-state kid, but also partly because Tennessee has an offense that's exciting. So I think you get an offensive discount, not a go to the NFL discount, but I could see a time, Tennessee's culture, where a lot of kids, yes, they get some NIL so they don't have to go without their Taco Bell like Arian Foster lied about, but you don't have to give $8 million to a quarterback from California. That was the splash one. I think we'll be talking about much more realistic numbers in the coming years. We'll see. And if there's a cap, that's possible, but that seems really illegal to me unless there's a union. What down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
How many SEC schools do you believe can compete with spending $10 million to this point on incoming players? What SEC schools can compete financially, not have to compete like Georgia, but can compete? And then I want to ask you specifically about Tennessee and why I don't think they can compete with Ohio State dollars penny for penny. But that's splitting hairs. First, what SEC schools can compete with that type of cash?
I think the 2 Texas schools can, since Texas is joining the SEC. I think they'll be able to.
Agreed.
That's it. Nobody else can compete with Tennessee in NIL cash on a year-to-year basis. Nobody. Tennessee is.
So you think Tennessee and the 2 Texas schools can compete with Ohio State? That was the question.
Yes, they can compete with those 3 can compete with Ohio State. Nobody else can.
I think Alabama and Georgia can. Okay, so if you look at revenue out of the top 25 schools, who do you think's number one? Now, this is not the same thing. Money coming into the university is not the same as NIL. It doesn't mean they have that all in place, but I think there's usually a similarity. Who do you think's number one in terms of revenue in the entire nation?
I would venture to guess Texas A&M, but could I be wrong on that?
A&M 7. Ohio State's number one at $251 million. Texas is $239 million. Alabama $214 million. Michigan $210 million. Georgia $203 million. LSU $199. Texas A&M $193. Now, these numbers that I'm giving you are somewhat dated because we know Tennessee has eclipsed $200 million. They released that not long ago. So these numbers are a little bit dated because all the numbers haven't come in. But if you ask me that question, I think that Tennessee, I think the SEC teams that can compete with Ohio State and Michigan, for that matter, are Texas, the Texas schools, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Alabama. As for Tennessee,
all SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
Can the Vols compete with that sort of cash? I'll remind you, 4 Downs is brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas. Go to Dynasty Pools and Spas for your chemicals and visit their showroom in Athens. Mention Off the Hook Sports. Get $500 off your next spa, and they deliver to Knoxville and Chattanooga. All right. So you think Tennessee can compete with that sort of spending, correct?
Right now they can. Yes, right now. But not long term, because I will tell you this, and I thought about this as we've been talking. And I say this for the Texas schools joining the SEC. Long term, because of the bad Sankey deal with ESPN, the SEC schools just won't be able to compete with the Big Ten, period. I mean, you're going to see Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio State with that revenue they got coming in. They're going to lap the SEC in revenue spending because they have, when those TV contracts start paying out, they will be able to, donors will be able to donate so much less money that they'll be able to just open up checkbooks for talent. And I mean, to the level that I'm not going to be surprised if you see Wisconsin go down to, you'll see Wisconsin and Iowa go down to Texas and just pluck Texas talent out of the state. And by the way, you know, I talked about Louisiana kids staying in Louisiana. I think they'll pluck some Louisiana kids away out of LSU easily with the NIL money they'll have.
I don't think Tennessee can consistently compete with those type of dollars right now. And I think Tennessee has one of the best NIL initiatives out there. But we're talking a different level of dollars. If you look at all of these schools, you would expect Ohio State, since some of the numbers I gave you are a little bit dated, they'll be pushing $300 million within a couple of years, especially with the TV money. So I think that schools would be wise, Alabama, to find things that are appealing to your school that are not just NIL. And with losing Nick Saban, that becomes incredibly difficult. Tennessee, I think, has to offset that with, hey, listen, the old John Calipari thing, don't trip over nickels to get to millions. That is what they've got to say. That and Ryan Day might be on the hot seat this year or definitely next year if they don't go deep into the college football playoff. Still sounds weird saying that. They don't go deep into the college football playoff. But I don't think Tennessee could compete with that sort of cash long term. I think what you have to sell is, yes, Ohio State may be able to give you $1 million, but we can give you 800,000. And you can then be at this school and you can have a great corporate culture where it's very supportive and this is a better fit for you. I think there's a lot of things you can sell. I think when you're talking about those type of dollars, including the NFL, you can sell that as well. I think you have to start selling other things besides just the whatever it may be, $1 million. Now, as far as the promotion of it, I think that's stupid. I think that, frankly, it's really stupid. I think Tennessee and Spire Sports regrets letting that $8 million leak out there for Nico. I don't know why you would do that, and it just speaks to me of desperation getting back to Ohio State. You brought it up this morning. It is total desperation. It is this year or nothing for Ryan Day, I believe. And I didn't think so when I woke up this morning before I talked to you at our 3:45 a.m. production meeting. Caleb, you've been saying this for a long time, and Caleb's ahead of the curve on a lot of things. I thought Ohio State would be fine, just kind of chugging along. But, man, losing to Michigan is a big deal.
3 years in a row.
Yes. 3 years in a row. I mean, that is and I did work for a company out of Ohio, and it's a big, big deal for a lot of casual fans as well. So, Caleb, you have the NFL is split in Cleveland and Cincinnati among football fans, but they're all behind Ohio State. They're not split between that and Cincinnati. So should that concern Tennessee fans in the future that they might not be able to compete with that type of spending?
Okay, so there's two stories to get out here with Ohio State and what they're doing. Things as they are right now, and I say that pre-Big Ten TV revenue coming in. This spinning by Ohio State is like the Ole Miss spinning with Lane Kiffin. It wouldn't be a yearly thing that they would do, Dave. It would just be this one specific year they open up the checkbook because they want to send a message to Ryan Day, put up or shut up. So it's just this year on that. The message you just put up, till Valhalla, OSU can't spend that much every year. That's the point I would make. Tennessee would typically be able to compete with OSU outside of this year because of what OSU is going all in on this year. Here's the curveball, though. OSU may be ahead of the curve in realizing the TV revenue that's going to come in, meaning they're going to go ahead and realize, okay, we can jump the gun and start spending a lot now because we don't need this booster money. And this is what I talked about, where it was a big mistake with that SEC deal. And I think if Tennessee, here's where Tennessee will be able to compete with Ohio State spending wise 5 years down the road if they leave the SEC and join the Big Ten. Now, everybody's heads in Knoxville would explode if that happened, okay? But I'm telling you, you are in danger as the SEC right now of falling further behind the Big Ten than the ACC is behind you right now in the SEC.
I firmly disagree with that. Caleb and I openly disagree on that. I think there are some incentives, some things in there with the SEC contract that I got a little hint on that I think and we're not going to know for 5 years who's right, Caleb, but in 5 years, we'll look back at it and say it wasn't as bad as you think. I still think the Big Ten deal is better. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's night and day difference. Now, I want to get to this for a second, not to get off topic, but Daniel says, I don't feel like we're anywhere close to the 25 million goal of the volunteer club. It's hard to believe that after 3 seasons, it has over $4,000 or 4,000 members. Hey guys, can I ask you a quick question? Are you spending money on the volunteer club? Because I believe there's going to come a day when we look back and guys said, great people that make up the state of Tennessee and make up Tennessee's fan base that are making $50,000, $60,000 are giving a couple of $100 a month to be in this volunteer club. And I'm not knocking any fundraising, but in retrospect, guys, you're talking about a very small percentage of your hard-earned cash that is going to NIL money. They're depending not on you. That's a money-making venture. And this might get me in trouble. But to send your hard-earned cash, I mean, goodness gracious, give it to Zach Turner, who I believe is still in the link down below. His wife's his wife's going through cancer. Listen, Walmart's going to spend millions. I'm just picking Walmart. Corporations are going to spend millions. Your little bit that could be a car payment is not going to make a big difference. I'm sorry. Do not spend your hard-earned money doing that. I mean, it befuddles the mind. Plus, you're giving it to some people that you're not 100% sure what percentage they're taking. And I ask around a lot, and I've been told anywhere from 10 to 90%. I'm not ripping anyone, and I don't know. But I would want a lot more transparency before I stroke a check for $400 or $500 a month, and my wife comes to me and says, what's this volunteer club thing? I want a lot more transparency. So I'm curious. I'm going to ask you guys, you're hardcore fans on the message board. So do you send money to collectives to get players? Do you think it helps? Caleb, I'm sorry, but it doesn't help.
No, it's a scam to subsidize the boosters who would spend the money anyway. It's like, by the way, it's like when you go to the store. You ever go to the store and the grocery store says, "Would you like to donate $1 to child hunger?" Guys, they're donating that dollar anyway. They just want it to come from you so they can write it off on their taxes as a charity. That's what they're doing, okay? They're going to send that money anyway to the child hunger thing of whatever they're donating. It's like, for instance, and we all see it when the government tells us we got to tax you more to pay for this, and then you go and it affects you, but then you go and you look and you're like, wait a minute, but Amazon didn't pay any taxes last year. Wouldn't you have made more money just making them pay their taxes rather than like taxing my hard-earned cash that actually affects me?
I would rather you wait outside the stadium with $500 in hand and hand it to Cooper Mays, and Cooper Mays has to do something for it, but he could retweet you saying, "Hey, I met Cooper Mays," And then if he retweeted it, that's considered a service. So you can pay him $500 for that. Stand outside Neyland Stadium long enough, and the players will come out and just hand them a bunch of cash. Daniel says membership starts at $5. I pay $25 a month. I'm not rich. The $25 a month is well worth you get in the tailgates in return. That's
so maybe
cool.
there's a return. If there's a return, that's fine.
That's totally cool. And if you're getting something out of it, I get that, Daniel. And I didn't mean to single you out or be in a finger
But
pointer.
make sure you're getting something out of it.
Yes. So listen, if you want to pay $25 a month and you get in an exclusive club, that's fine. Go for it. But make sure you get something out of it. Daniel, I know the narrative is 10% goes to operational cost and 90% to the players, but I got to be real honest with you. I don't know that I believe that number, and I'm not calling anybody.
I have covered nonprofit charities as a local journalist, and I can tell you that way more goes to operational costs than they tell you goes to operational costs.
Yes.
Typically with charities, but long story short, in all of this,
and Travis is making fun of me. Not to interrupt you, Caleb. Travis is making fun of me. You want to stand outside the stadium and give dudes cash? Well, if you want 100% know that it's going to them, yeah, and have them.
Well, and also think about this. Now, again, Danny White's doing a fundraising goal. Now, Danny White has actually shown his interest in helping to grow UT beyond what previous athletic directors were doing. But Tennessee had a decade of dysfunction, as we've all well know. And wouldn't they have Dave, if this was like 2017, wouldn't it be a lot of nerve for them to ask for this money from fans in 2017 when they hadn't delivered? Like, wouldn't the fans have a right to say, hey, how about you actually show us that you can be semi-competent in what you're doing before we sit there and open up the checkbook for you? Because Tennessee had a massive decade of dysfunction. And honestly, this is going to hurt Alabama because they were going to try to raise from fans too, because the boosters aren't willing to give the way the boosters should give. And I keep saying this, Alabama fans, y'all need to step up and demand that the boosters cobble up money, because you're not going to get commitments just because people like Alabama. That's not going to happen.
Colton says, I'd rather give it to Dave for a great show. Now, if I can only remember to like his videos, hit the like button. Colton, hit it now. Everybody hit it now, right now, so we can bring more people in. We have an announcement coming here, maybe by the end of the week, where I don't believe in asking you for money. I know that a lot of YouTubers do that. I would rather you give it to Zach Turner, who's below. His wife's battling cancer. Or I would rather you purchase a book where you get something out of it. And I was just so, like I was preaching before, it would be hypocritical to say donate money to me. I don't want that. Give it to Zach and please buy a book. I will ask you that, because I ordered too many and I've got extra books, and I'll throw in a t-shirt for anybody that orders a book today. I also think that Travis brings up a good point. It's finally subscribed. Thank you. I'm always at work and lazy. All right. So Travis says it makes people feel involved. Now, I think that's cool. And as long as it's not a bunch of money, no harm, no foul. Agreed. And I've learned something. You get something back. You get to go in that volunteer club. So that's all well and good. But we do have something coming up that we're excited about, where we're going to be able to give out weekly prizes. And we're going to start a bit of a club as well. But we're not going to call it a club, because a club sounds goofy. It sounds like something you would do when you were 8 years old. So we're going to call it something else, but you'll have the opportunity to win great prizes. So thank you for subscribing, Colton. Finally, I've seen you on here, and man. And Derek, by the way, you're not pulling me into a political conversation. I said 25 years ago when I got in this business, you'll know what I think about sports, but you'll never know what I think about. Wow, that's good. You'll never know what I think about politics. The Hooker Club, I'm in. All right. That's what we'll do. But you're going to have an opportunity to win big time stuff. So we're working on that. The missus, the other hooker in the house, is going to put that together. But we're talking about some pretty significant prizes and frequent prizes, because by golly, if the state of Tennessee can run a lottery, why can't I, Caleb?
No, that's fair. That's a good point.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna be giving away lots of stuff. Yes,
we're gonna run a brothel too. We're gonna run a brothel too. Pretty soon,
No,
guys.
we're not. It's risky. It's risky business. We're gonna have, we're gonna have that classic song playing, old time rock and roll. What was the name of that song? Oh, was it Bob Seger? Herald Group Security Solutions, leadership, experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques, making your children safer one school at a time. HeraldGRP.com. We've seen the tragedies around schools and your workplace. Ask your work administrator or the school administrator to reach out to HeraldGRP.com. Herald Group Security Solutions, not just the security guards, a real highly trained individuals that will protect your children or protect you. All right. So do you really have to tamper to take away a player from Alabama? Apparently so, because a program has done that. I thought you just called them and they said, I'm ready to get the HE double hockey sticks out of here. I thought it was that simple, but somebody is tampering with Alabama players during the season. How bleeping livid would you be if you're Josh Heupel and people are calling your players to say, come play for us? 2 minutes, Caleb Calhoun, Dave Hooker, unbelievable. Next.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun at cctis.com.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
We believe every day is a good day to be thirsty. With free samples on draft and lots of flavors to choose from, Tennessee Cider Company prepares a hard cider that's easy to enjoy. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. The area of Gatlinburg has so much to offer, and so does Tennessee Cider Company. Add us to your list for shopping and fun experiences. You'll be glad you made the trip. Find our cidery in the Mountain Mall on the Gatlinburg Parkway. Sip smart. Sip the good stuff. Sip Tennessee Cider Company. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Should we call our group the brothel? Travis says, Dave, do you have a doormat that says, welcome to the brothel? You should. We're going to be giving all kinds of stuff away very soon as part of an exclusive group you get to be a part of that's very inexpensive, and we're excited to do that here into the future. Should we call it the brothel?
I mean,
I kind of like it. Travis says, Dave, do you have a doormat that says, welcome to the brothel? You should. Hell yeah, I will. Excuse my language. That's happening.
I brought this up when I first was on the show.
Honey, can we go ahead and, we're going to go ahead and get the doormat, the brothel made up.
I brought this up when I was first on the show, but we have way more listeners now than then, so many people may not know this. But for those who don't know, Dave, we can just go ahead and say you are descended from Joseph Hooker, right? The Union General.
Yes.
And Joseph Hooker is where the term hooker came from.
Hooker's girls is what they were called, and he would take women, if I may. He would take women with him on battalion battles, and everything went great, and morale was fantastic. And then, oops, syphilis.
And by the way,
true story.
Abraham Lincoln used tax money to pay for those girls. I love Lincoln. I think he was an awesome president, but he used hard-earned tax dollars of American citizens to provide Joseph Hooker with those lovely ladies to help the troops at the time.
Daniel says, I keep hearing the Welcome to the Jungle song in my head. If it wasn't for YouTube copyright stuff, that would be it. You're right, Travis. That dad blame syphilis will do it every time.
Every time, right. Man.
Okay? Are we making it official? The new club that's going to give away stuff on a weekly and grand prizes on a monthly basis is called the Brothel. Is that what we're doing here? Join the Brothel, or do we need to think about this, Caleb?
Oh, Colton Ditmore, don't call it that unless you want Hugh Freeze joining. Dude, Hugh Freeze will never join. He's way too scared of me. That's
right.
Also, no, because our brothels, everybody is of age.
Youch.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I went there. Hugh Freeze can go to one that Karl Malone goes to.
Yuck. You two can join the brothel soon. My son actually we were playing the NBA 2K last night. My son subs Karl Malone out because he's such a disgusting human being. By the way,
Karl Malone in his career, I think, averaged at his peak was averaging about 20 points and 13 rebounds. So, guys, Google Karl Malone 20 and 13.
Yeah. Okay. Let's change gears. We got a little silly here, but I will tell you this: that when it comes to Karl Malone, I remember interviewing him, and he said that I'm close to landing the Grand Slam of sheep. And I said, what? I didn't know about the kid stuff. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, no, it's not what you think. And I said, well, I wasn't thinking you were sleeping with the sheep. But apparently you go to 4 different continents, and there's a Grand Slam of sheep. If you want to look that up, we can do that. But instead, let's talk about tampering with the SEC in Alabama. Brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler. Looking for affordable game day jewelry? The Fire Opals, the Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. Iowa potentially tampering with Alabama offensive lineman Kadyn Proctor. This to me is pretty dastardly. Let's pull it up right now. Mr. Proctor, talk to us, sir.
So Kadyn Proctor committed to Iowa last week, and this was him at the Iowa basketball game over the weekend in an interview talking about his commitment. So I'm just going to play what he said.
No bridges were burnt, you know what I'm saying? So that's why it was so easy for me to pick them when I did enter the transfer portal, because we still have those relationships. And even after I was doing bad in the SEC, and struggling, they hit me up and said, we're proud of you. You're gonna get through this, and that's what ultimately helped me with my decision, because they still believed in me. It feels good, you know what I'm saying?
That's the point that matters. He basically said when he was struggling in the SEC, Iowa hit him up while he was struggling, which means that they hit him up while he was playing at Alabama, which by every definition is tampering.
Yes, this needs to be the new. You remember the paying players was the one thing that you couldn't do. It was the one NCAA cardinal sin. This needs to be the new cardinal sin of contacting players. Now, I don't know how you police it, and the NCAA can't police anything. But if you don't think that schools reached out to a certain guy that we've talked about a lot, his name's Nico. If you don't think schools reached out to him last year, you're crazy. I mean, I would have, because the NCAA has no teeth. If I'm a coach that has all that riding on me, I won't say I would have, because I like to think of myself as a moral person. I think 90% of the people would.
I mean,
yeah. So
I would, in the sense of outside of like steroids or putting things in your body, I'm not against breaking the rules if there's no punishments for it, quite honestly. I mean, if the NCAA can't, how else are you going to compete? Look at Jim Harbaugh. Homeboy just won a national championship after getting suspended twice in a season.
Yeah. I think tampering is going to be a real issue with that sort of cash. I think where it's particularly distasteful is, let's say, lower level schools that can't match it, can't match that type of money. Like Tulane, Tennessee got a player from Tulane that may have an impact this season. I don't know that they reached out during the football season, but nothing would surprise me, especially with the calendar you've put on these coaches. It's absurd. So you're supposed to keep your guys. You're supposed to go get other guys. And at the same time, you're supposed to get ready for a bowl game. How in the world can you do that? Caleb?
Not to mention next year, you're going to have to be getting ready for playoff games weekly because you'll have, if you're in the 12-team playoff, there's 4 games you might be getting ready for at different times. And you're telling me you have to get ready for 4 different playoff games while at the same time dealing with NIL and the transfer portal. Oh, and by the way, the early signing period is around that time too, just so y'all know. So you're right. It's crazy. Of course you're going to tamper. You're going to try to get these guys in the season because you won't have time in the transfer portal when it opens, particularly because, like you said, look, I'm actually going to break with you. I don't think this should really be a sin. I honestly, I don't think it's a big deal. Coaches are all the time in conversation with other teams when they're coaching at a school. They do that all the time. How many times have coaches been hired away when they were in conversation before they got hired away? Jim Harbaugh right now is in conversation with NFL teams, and he has been the whole time he was coaching at Michigan. I mean, this is a regular par for the course thing. On a just funny level, though, Iowa shows how outdated they are. Of all the things they were going to risk their trouble with, they were going to tamper. They were going to do it for an elite offensive lineman. Offensive line is not Iowa's weakness. Their lack of skill players are, but they're like, nope, we got to get better on that offensive line. The one thing we're good at.
Kirk Ferentz is just that type of coach. That doesn't surprise me. He would rather have 10 competent offensive linemen than 9 and 1 elite skill position players. That doesn't surprise me at all based off coaches I've talked to about Ferentz. I'm not saying it's right. It's not. It's stupid. But so you're saying it's cool. So you're saying you would be totally cool with somebody reaching out to Nico. And it's so easy to do. It's so easy because you could reach out to the high school coach. You could reach out to somebody else. Listen, Nico, if he wasn't the mature young man, and I knew, even though I said from the get that Joe Milton was not the best answer for the majority of this season, and I will stand by that, and Tennessee would have won more games had they played Nico more and at certain times. I don't want to get belabored. Okay. I don't want to get belabored by that, but I believe that firmly. So if Nico believed that and everybody else on the team believed that, then you've got to wonder, why didn't Nico listen, or did he? My information tells me he never would have listened to that because he's a mature young man and way beyond his years. Again, guys, I can't tell you what a lock I think Nico is. And I'll tell you the truth. Sometimes you don't like to hear it. So I don't think he would have listened, but would Carson Beck have listened instead of sitting behind Stetson Bennett? Maybe.
The only regulation should be on.
He thinks he's way more talented than Stetson. Sorry, Caleb.
No, he does, but he was probably let's be honest, Nico was probably promised already by Hypo. I guarantee, Dave, this conversation happened in August, and you can tell him you don't know, you don't have a source, but how much would you bet this conversation happened? Josh Heupel talked to Nico in August and said, okay, you may not start this year, but you are 100% the starter going into 2024, and there won't even be a competition. The job is yours.
I think they probably had that conversation in recruiting.
I think so too. And I think Josh Heupel's been very clear from the start. The job is Nico. The job is Nico's after 2023. He's all but said it to Tennessee fans publicly, hasn't he? I mean, he can't, but in reality, do you think Jake Merklinger is going to split first team reps with Nico in the spring?
I do not.
Exactly. Nico's going to get all the reps. It's very clear who the starter is. Okay. There's not even a debate on this. And so for Nico, it would be like, what good is it for me to transfer when I'm already going to be the starter here and I'm in a better system with Josh Heupel? I don't really mind the tampering thing.
Maybe there should be an open tampering period, like in the middle of the season. You've got an off week where you can contact other teams' players. I'm only half joking.
I mean, that's not a crazy idea.
Not the most obscene thing.
But then you're really screwed depending on when your off week is. I mean,
that's right.
So
I don't have time to tamper this week because Alabama's on the schedule. What am I going to do?
I mean, you already have to recruit in the season. Unfortunately, you've always had to do that, right? I mean, even during Fulmer's era, didn't they have to do a lot of recruiting while the season was going on? A lot of times.
Oh yeah, Philip Fulmer would leave the field at times during the Vanderbilt and Kentucky practices to go make phone calls. And I thought it was smart at the time, and I still think it's smart. Now, there were a couple of times that the game got a little bit close, but I don't think that was because of Philip Fulmer's focus on recruiting. I think that was because
the players didn't want to play the game.
Yeah, it's cold. We didn't want to be there as media members, and the press box is usually heated. Although one time at the University of Kentucky, this is how pathetic of a program that used to be. Some would argue still is. The entire glass in front of me, it was so cold outside, and with the heat blowing on it, the glass in the press box exploded right in front of me. The glass.
Oh my gosh.
I had to move.
That's dangerous.
Yes, it was dangerous. And I had just gotten up to go feed my fat face, or I would have been covered in glass. Yes.
Oh my gosh. So
that's your Wildcats, Kentucky fans.
Well, and also, as a reporter, you're probably, let's be honest, the last 2 weeks of November outside of Tennessee, those are some of the most exciting games in all of college football. That's rivalry week. Georgia, Auburn, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn. You know what I mean? And you're having to sit there and cover Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I mean,
thank you. I've never said that publicly because it makes me sound like a whiny bee. But yes, there were other games I wanted to watch. Sports Treasures carrying over 5 million sports treasures. And I'm going to tell you more because I want to talk some Todd Helton. Who thinks that is incredible that he got into Baseball Hall of Fame? Kudos to Todd Helton. I'm so incredibly happy for him. You can talk about all you want to, the thin air in Colorado, but his extended, fantastic career is one that should be in the Hall of Fame. I believe that firmly. I don't think, though, he would have made it had it not been for the huge number and group of guys that were in the steroid era that might have bumped him out and kept him from getting in. So I'm glad he gets in, a guy that was right for the game. I told my story earlier about when he was drafted in 92 to the Padres, and we're senior trip, and I was right outside the door when he got drafted. But I could tell you more stories. I certainly miss his late father, who I used to work out with and see on a regular basis at the gym. Just a fantastic dude. But I will tell you one thing that gets, I believe, lost in Todd Helton when we talk about baseball players is I did play-by-play for Central High School when Zach Helton was a too small quarterback for college, but a great high school player. He was an incredible athlete. His dad could lay down and on the bench and push 225 for reps, and I'd only see him do 1 or 2 working sets every couple of weeks. There is a difference between just God-given natural talent, and I think sometimes we overlook how special Todd Helton was to be able to take competent snaps in the SEC and then be one of the best baseball players of his generation. You can find, I'm sure, memorabilia for Todd at Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. You can go to Facebook and follow them on Sports Treasures TN. That's Sports Treasures TN. What do you think of Todd Helton? I've never asked you before.
Let's address the whole thin air comment because everybody says that him playing in Colorado. You want to know what Todd Helton's OPS was away from home for his career?
It was actually better, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. It was still better at home, but like still, okay. His OPS away from home was no, it was good. It was 855. His OPS away from home was 855. for context, Ken Griffey Jr., who everybody agrees should be in the Hall of Fame, was only at 860 for OPS for his career. Now, that should tell you that Todd Helton was legitimately good, even if the thin air fueled him. OPS is the most important stat for offense. You don't even need any other stat in baseball anymore. That's all you need is OPS. And Todd Helton was parallel with Ken Griffey Jr., the most marketable baseball player of the 1990s and of his era. So he absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think the thing that sticks out about Todd Helton to me is that obviously he wanted to go focus. I think Todd Helton, he committed and he was teammates with Heath Schuler and then Peyton Manning. I think Todd Helton realized the reason I had read stories, the reason he wanted to go concentrate on baseball was because he kind of realized he wasn't on Heath Schuler's level. And that kind of made him realize that he wasn't going to be an NFL quarterback. But he still, for those who don't know this, he still stayed on the 94 team because the coaches wanted him to help bring Peyton Manning along. It wasn't for, that's why he did it, just to help out with the young quarterbacks on the roster that were the future of the team. And then he gets thrust into being the starting quarterback, which he didn't plan to do. And, you know, he actually got a pretty impressive win. Go back and watch that game at Athens against Georgia. Georgia was actually probably the better team that year. I think James Stewart just absolutely torched Georgia in the second game of the 94 season, almost brought him back to beat UCLA. I think Todd Helton did that because he loved Tennessee and he's a great guy. And that's the only reason he did it, because he could have solely focused on baseball. And honestly, he risked his baseball career. He got hurt playing quarterback at Tennessee.
He's the ultimate volunteer for a couple of different reasons. Because I think volunteer has to do with loyalty. You know, we think Vols, we go think of course, protecting the Alamo and the charge, but a part of being from the Mexican Army, but part of that too, right, Caleb, is not leaving. I mean, you can volunteer and go, and then when things get bad, sneak out the back door. Todd Helton didn't do that. He stayed at Colorado, and I know from the days of working out with his dad, that was a touchy subject. Let me tell you why. Apex Apparel Group, if you own a business, go to your apexapparel.com. It is right below, or just call Tyler, 865-919-3001, 865-919-3001. And whether it's mugs, shirts, whatever you need, he'll make sure your business is outfitted. Do me that favor. If you own a business, click right below your Apex Apparel. You'll be happy that you did. So with Todd Helton and working out with his dad, there was a feeling amongst the family, and this is some inside insight that you just won't get anywhere else. But there was a feeling amongst the family that it's time, when he signed that big deal with the Rockies, that he should go to a team like the Yankees, that he wouldn't make the Hall of Fame. And that was specifically discussed if he stayed in Colorado. Unfair or not, they thought that would always be used against him. So what did he do? He stayed with Colorado, and he was loyal to that area because he loved those fans. He's got like a 400-acre ranch out there. I say good for him, and I wanted him to be a Yankee. I would have probably bought the Dad Blame jersey. But, I mean, good for him for not taking the easy way out. Same thing at Tennessee. He wanted to play football for Tennessee, and he was drafted in the second round of the Padres. By the Padres before that happened. Who does that? Who goes to their home school when there's that type of money at stake and no NIL dollars, and leads Tennessee to one of the most special times in their college baseball history? Who does those sorts of things? I think he's incredibly underrated as one of the most beloved Vols of all time. And by the way, there's no question that Del Murphy belongs in the Hall of Fame as well. But let's talk Todd. Did you know all that about Todd? Some of that surprised you?
A little bit. I did not know that he looked into going to the Yankees. That's a really impressive story. I had no idea about that. Yeah, that's it. You know, you kind of really wish you could have, you know, I know Colorado made the World Series in 2007. I actually thought they had a better team than Boston that year. The problem was, and Dave, how many times have you seen this? And this is the problem with baseball in the postseason. The Rockies swept their way to the World Series, and the Red Sox won a bunch of 7-game series to get there. So by the time the Red Sox had gotten there, they had been playing fresh, and the Rockies had been off for like a week. And you know, in baseball, it's so much more about being in rhythm. That's why nowadays in baseball, the first round bye is so stupid. which they do for the postseason now, because it hurts the team that gets the first round bye. You need to be in rhythm. And so I think that's an incredible story about Todd Helton. And by the way, guys, I put this up on Twitter and I want to address this.
Can I ask you this real quick, Caleb?
Sure.
Go ahead. What you put on Twitter? Tell me that.
Tennessee hasn't had an in-state starting quarterback since Todd Helton in 1994. He gets inducted to the Hall of Fame the day after George McIntyre commits, who will be in probably 2026 the first in-state starting quarterback for Tennessee since Todd Helton.
Kind of running off Merklinger. But anyway, if he's
which, by the way, well, funny enough you say that, because
all over Merklinger, but
North Carolina has actually been low key the best state for quarterbacks at Tennessee. Heath Schuler, Jonathan Crompton, and Hendon Hooker, all from North Carolina.
Don't write off Merklinger yet.
I wrote off Taven Jackson last year, so I can do it with Merklinger.
Okay, if he's a Red Sox or a Yankee with the same numbers, he's already in the Hall of Fame like as soon as he's eligible, right? Like 5 years.
Yes. As a matter of fact, Red Sox and Yankees. Derek Jeter is a Hall of Famer, but Derek Jeter getting mentioned in the same breath as like the most elite names of baseball the last 30 years is absolutely laughable. Because Derek Jeter, when was Derek Jeter ever the best player in baseball? Never. He was never the best player on his own team. Okay? It's
not having this discussion.
He's not on Griffey's level. He was not on Barry Bonds' level. He was not on Frank Thomas's level. He was not on Jim Tomey's level. He was not on Chipper Jones' level.
You're not factoring in leadership.
Oh my gosh. Hall of Fame is about production, not leadership.
He's definitely a Hall of Famer, though. We're not arguing that.
No, I agree he's a Hall of Famer.
How long has it been since we heard The Voice? I was enjoying that time. But he's definitely a Hall of Famer.
Todd Helton was a better player than Derek Jeter. Clearly, Todd Helton was a better player than Derek Jeter.
Oh, him and Wilt, they do have a lot in common with women. Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, but Wilt actually was the best player in the NBA year in and year out when he played.
Yeah, but he wasn't the best player on the streets. That's Derek. It's not quantity, it's quality. I'll leave you with that. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. Ladies love Jeter. Have a fantastic day, evening, night, whenever you're listening. Off the Hook Sports, 10 a.m. weekdays, Monday through Friday with Caleb Calhoun.